Go during the tournament.
May 3rd, 2016. This is a facilities committee meeting. We have Banwell Architect representatives here, and we have an agenda. It's up on the website. I'll briefly go through it. We met the school board, the facilities committee, and the school board met a couple of weeks ago to discuss the latest draft, underlined draft of the ed specs for both schools. Had a discussion, made some progress there. Later on that week, or I think the week after, the school board met on a work session. All of this stuff is on Channel 13 for people who want to watch. And further, made some changes. We're not done yet. I think it's important to emphasize that this is a draft. There's going to be an opportunity. There's always an opportunity for public input. If you go on the facilities site, there's a place there where you can submit questions. You can always call one of us. You can always show up at a school board meeting. There's a public opportunity. But beyond that, we're going to hold sessions here over the next month. We don't have dates locked up yet. We'll have the principals and hopefully the superintendent on a couple occasions where people can come in and we can talk about where we are with the ed specs and get people's input. So we haven't made any final decisions on this, and we won't, but we do have to work hard to narrow it down, because it is a foundational document, and I think we're doing a pretty good job at that. If people had read the JAC report, we're sort of coming down incrementally into that sort of range of square footage. So people ought to know that as well. This isn't a repeat of a $45 million new school effort. More on that in a little bit. But what I thought we would do first, we did make some changes since the last meeting to the draft, and so we'd like to just go over that first so people can understand what's been done. We have a little continuity. If you want to watch all these meetings, or you can also see the versions of the ed specs online. We have them up there on the website. Feel free, and by all means, ask us questions if something's unclear. This stuff isn't what a lot of us do in our daily lives. Some of it's foreign. A lot of it was foreign to a lot of us when we started this process. So questions are very much appreciated and welcomed, and on that and really anything else that may come to mind. So we'll do that first. The Banwell team was down at the schools over vacation last week doing an existing conditions confirmation. Essentially, I don't want to oversimplify it, but measuring, making sure we know exactly what's there. Fortunately, this was a pleasant surprise. We have a lot of as-built drawings for the schools dating back many years, and maybe you can weigh in on that a little bit, which obviously helps to understand what's there. That doesn't always happen in a small town, that records are kept like that, but in this particular instance it worked out. We're going to talk a little bit about the existing sites, issues regarding the various school sites, a review of the Carpenter site across the street. There is recently up on the website a drawing of the Carpenter site done by the Doucette firm here in town, which essentially, and thanks to Skip Manso for helping us out, push that along with the Doucette firm. It basically tells us what the buildable area is. There's wetlands over there. In one of our prior meetings, I think just before the new year, we discussed what it means to have these wetlands, and I would encourage people, if they're interested, to watch that meeting, because there's a price to be paid if you use wetlands, and you pay it to the state wetland fund. We talked about that in a prior meeting, but this latest iteration of the Carpenter survey tells us how much buildable area we have, and so I think it was important that we sort of refine that. That's up on the website. Then we're going to review yet further options. I'm already talking too much. Reviewing the last options. Again, no decisions are being made. That will be, yet another phase of this analysis where we'll get deeper into those, and we'll have public input as to, what what people, you know, might desire, or, you know, in terms of various options we're going to consider. We got to get the ed specs sort of wrapped up first, because that's foundational. Then we're going to go over a schedule, which is also up on the website of, it's sort of a project schedule from now until the bond vote, and then I think last thing we ought to do is try to set another meeting date for this group. So people know, maybe I mentioned it already, we are going to meet a Joint Facilities Committee and School Board again this Thursday at 5:30 to 7 to review the ed specs, and I hope at that time that Meredith Nadeau, our incoming superintendent, will weigh in with her thoughts, in addition to everybody else who's there. So that's enough from me. Is there any questions before we get going? I'll give it to you, Brad, and we can see what we've done with the most recent version of these ed specs.
Sure, terrific.
You know, before you get going, we've got some guests here, and I think we got enough copies. You can talk, and I'll pass these things out.
Sure.
So they can see them.
So the revisions that we've made to the ed specs since the last meeting are really, for the most part, format. There are a few minor revisions we've made, and they were all based on the last meeting. There's no real surprises here. So I'm going to go through them very quickly. Stop me if you need me to back up if I'm going too fast. But mostly this is formatting. There was a request on both schools that we have, just some sort of summary sheet in the front, and I hope you found that helpful. We only made one change to the description in the elementary school, which is the package I'm going to start with, and that was the description of the classroom for the music. We're just expanding the instrumental instruction space. We're not expanding the music classroom per se, so it's slightly different wording. As far as the overall square footage of the ed spec, the only real square footage change was the addition of the flex classroom, which we talked about in the last meeting, which we put in as 1,000 square foot space, which makes it as flexible as possible. And some clarification on the music storage and getting that right sized by 100 square feet or so. So there really isn't any other significant changes to this program on that score. Then at the end, on the last page, we just tried to clean up the summary a little bit to make it easier to read. But literally no other changes to this program worth mentioning.
The one thing I would like to point out, because we have last week gone to look at the existing conditions plans, previously our takeoffs on the existing areas were basically ballparked. So now that we've gone to measure, and now that Mike has found those plans, existing plans, we can actually get all of these existing areas to the square foot.
So that's not in this will be up.
Not yet. These are pretty close. I mean, it's not going to change by 10,000 square feet, but there will be things that get updated.
Well, and there are some other cuts as we go through, and I was just thinking of a couple things that would be nice to have eventually. But if we talked about getting approvals that of classroom size, we wouldn't change it for another reason other than we'd have to add 30 square feet or 50 square feet, and we don't need it.
Right.
If you take those and you segregate them over here, saying it looks like these may meet requirements, which may take some that are larger out as well as smaller, because there's some netting that goes on in this process, and be able to say, what's the impact of the square footage once you say this set of things may not change? And then what does that do to the process? The other is sort of, I think this says, what, about 24% increase in space in the elementary school, but that's if you include the portables. So that
Well,
if you're saying the expansion of the school is probably more in the 35% range, based on the fact that you have to move those classrooms into the structure and stuff. Little things like that. I'm just putting pieces together.
Well, that's a very good point. And once we have those existing square footages, we can clarify that too. So we also, as a formatting change, we added a column for the number of pupils per classroom, which I think is going to be very useful when we get a chance to populate that. I'm sure Sean has those figures, and we can put that in, but I think that the utilization tables or the utilization study of how many kids are in each classroom is going to paint a better picture of the impact of these sizes of classrooms on the curriculum.
And the 900 standard that you used is based on what class size? I think most of the questions are...
24-ish.
24 people?
Yep.
So that would be the benchmark for a 900 square foot room.
So, and once we have the existing square footage information is going to impact the elementary school program more than the high school program, because as you may have recalled from our last meeting, we showed the classrooms for the elementary school at the same size they are now, anticipating them, not really a need for a change. So as that becomes more of a variable, or, because it's a set number until we verify the square footages, that will impact the overall program number for the total. On the high school, on the other hand, we used the state standards for the programmatic sizes of the spaces. So although the existing square footage of the building will change from the verification of the measuring, the program should not. The program shouldn't be altered. So
24,900 is a high school, junior high number, an elementary school number, the 24 kids in a 900 square foot.
That's
Oh.
not a high school. High school's 800 square feet.
For 24,
Correct.
and
Yeah.
elementary's 900 for the same?
Yes.
Okay.
If I'm, just to finish on that thought, the middle school part is a 900
Right.
square foot
Exactly.
standard.
took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, thanks. And then there's and all of this, again, I mean, we
As you
talked.
get larger, you need less space.
Right.
Makes perfect sense.
Right.
You don't run around as much.
Logical. That's right. So, all of these things are, we talk about standards. It's the New Hampshire DOE minimum standards, which we included in the materials last time. Again, those are up on the website, as well as a letter from council explaining the standards and how they, the legal issue and how they apply. That's there as well.
So the other small changes, Chris was both the principals were very helpful in between the last meeting and this one, and speaking with me and clarifying a couple issues, and I guess Chris went to the school board meeting.
Yep.
And there was some feedback from there, which we tried to incorporate, one of which is very small, but you'll notice that the word Zenden, or de-escalation room, has gone away, and there's a desire to use the word intervention room, so it's the same room. It's just a different name. We moved a couple of names around. Are there any questions on the elementary school?
Just a quick note. One, I'll just say thank you so much for the summary sheets. I think this is very, very helpful. Just kind of the overview, the bird's eye view, if you will, before you get into the weeds. So I thank you all for your time on that.
Sure.
So on the very last page, when there's the totals, and this is, I mean, I understand it, but I just wonder if there's a better way to present it. So additional program square foot above existing square feet, this is the second to last column, row, excuse me. When I first looked at this, I originally thought that the wants was at 15,000 feet. And that's not the case, right? It's
Right,
It's
that's the added
square footage
from existing.
from existing. I don't know whether or not there just might be maybe an asterisk or something
Yeah.
included.
In the comment, added square footage above existing.
Yeah, something along those lines, just so that it doesn't look like there's a 15,000 square feet of wants.
Good point.
Okay.
Yeah, same thing. I thought one of the interesting things that comes out of this, and just think about it, if you ended up putting the one-page summary that had the totals for each of the pieces, so that you can end up saying, gee, 80% of the space seems to be going towards program, or going towards administration, or going towards bathrooms, just may give people a sense rather than buried in this for presentation. That one chart that does percentages and square footages, so you have the 6 moving parts in front, not that one. And the only other thing I mentioned is how to bring out that 5,000, if I'm reading this correctly, almost 6,000 of the existing square paces in the temporary classrooms?
58,
Yeah,
56 square
5,800
feet.
out of 65,000, okay.
So what page are you on, just so? I
I'm
can
just on
see?
the last summary page.
Okay, last summary
Page
page.
9, where you say, here's the school at 59, and then let's add the portables of 5,800 to make it 65,000. And then when we make the comparison on the bottom, using 65,000 as a base, saying we want to, the existing needs are 72, so you'd have to add 6. None of that's coming from the portable, so I mean, really the base is, I guess, 59. So when you include the space that used to be portable in the building, it's not going up 24%, like the percentage says on the
going up
bottom. It's going
higher.
up like 35%. So, though you still, you know what I mean, the portables disappear, but the actual building itself is going up. People will play with percentages and numbers all the time, so.
Anything else on elementary for now?
So, on the junior, senior high school, there's a few more changes on that than the elementary school. There's a little bit of reformatting around the Perkins building, just to make it clearer as to what's an ad versus what's existing, both in the existing high school base building and then the Perkins building. So you might see some shuffling to clarify that. Then, on page 3, I believe, of the program under specialized classrooms, we had a little bit of a misunderstanding on our end as to the art kiln room and the fact that there isn't one actually in the existing high school now. That's in the Perkins building, as well as the photo lab, which is being used as a multisensory space. So the space is being, the building's being fully utilized to more than capacity, I guess you could say, but we just hadn't had those rooms properly labeled. So this is a small correction on that, and we moved them around to the right label. Then down on, still in specialized classrooms, under mobile computer lab, I am on
Is that
page,
specialized instructional or
specialized
Classroom,
specialized classroom?
Page 3.
Okay, yeah.
classroom, yep, page
Page 5.
3. So if we look at the mobile computer lab charging, it was a little bit unclear as to what that room was going to be for and what the other data needs were, and we just tried to clarify that a little bit, that they're doing push-in for the classrooms and storing the computers in the classrooms, and this is just a charging station, as it were. So,
In the comments section, I'm just looking at the next prior version, it says dedicated and locked for site for computer charging, and just so people can follow along, on page 3 of the new version, it just sort of explains what's going on in a little clearer way.
And from the columns, if I can get confused every time I look at this, I understand the existing area, I understand the existing needs as saying, based on what you have today, what would the square footage be under today's guidelines? The new needs, I understand. What confuses me is where we go from new needs to recommendations. Recommendations is purely additive. It's saying, you're not saying, for the sake of argument, if I look at general classroom subtotal, where we just were on page 3, which is like the third line down in green, it says your existing area is 22,527 feet. Existing needs are 24,900. The new needs are an additional 5,500, and the recommendations are 400.
I'm sorry, you've lost me. What page are you
Page
on?
3.
Page 3? Well, you can pick any,
Okay, gotcha. Yep.
but I'm looking at, if you have the color coding, at least that I do, it's green, but specialized classroom. So if you end up going 22,000 is the existing, 24,900 sort of suggests that we could use a little bit more space but not a huge amount on the existing, if I understand correctly, that there's 5,500 of new specific needs, which we can tick off. And then you get into recommendations and wants. And the recommendations are not in the need side. It's above and beyond. And so somebody saying, I really need this space, but you haven't included it in the new needs, so it's less of a priority. And then wants is a second layer beyond that of,
More of a wish list item.
okay, so new needs would be sort of priority one in the mind of the person putting it together. Recommendations would be priority two, and wants are priority three, if I had to try to put numbers to it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
And then is there a grand total? Not, no, I see, it's just additive at the end.
It's also on the front page now, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And on the,
And just to clarify too, I mean, and thanks to you, Brad, I think you recommended this. The needs and the new needs are a little tough to grapple with conceptually, because the new needs, like especially at the high school, incorporate potentially some of the existing space. So rather than trying to separate them out, we combine them as needs on the summary on the front page of this. It's just easier to follow, easier to understand. The total concept here was to try to break things out as much as we could, so, as Russ just described, so we could, put some sense of priority and order on things, and that's what we did by breaking up needs and new needs. But to bring it all back together, there's just one category on the front which says needs, and there's an asterisk there that explains it.
and it's worth mentioning that one of the logic reasons behind recombining them is even some of the new needs are functions that are existing in the building right now, but they don't have their own dedicated space.
Right.
They share it maybe with multiple program uses.
Yep.
So it's a new need in terms of it needs a new space, but it certainly is a need. It's something that is a programmatic
However,
need
if you start playing percentages and you go back to page 3, that general classroom subtotal, and you look at existing needs, 24.9, new needs, 5,500, that's 20% of that number. So and then you go to the summary, and you look at all of those things, unless you read the comments and understand that a lot of those programs already exist and they're like art on a card, or they don't have a permanent place to call home, I guess you gotta do your homework and really understand from the comments what's going on in the school on a daily basis.
Very difficult balance with these reports, no matter what community you're doing them for, to balance between the summary, which is truly a summary, and the granular information, and not trying to put too much in the summary, because then people just get confused. So it's very tough to layer the information.
My point was, don't get lost in the percentages and increases, because there's a story behind that.
Should we take the percentages out? Is it confusing? We thought it would be helpful, just because I figured people would do it anyway, so it's there. But if it's,
No, I'm saying, I think that it's good to have all that
Useful, but not
information.
necessarily meaningful, I think is what you were saying, wasn't it?
Well,
Sometimes it
I'm
is.
just saying, if somebody jumps into this, in and out of this, instead of being involved in it all the time, and you start playing the numbers game, and you start looking at it, and you say, geez, what are these people looking for another 20% over what's
Right.
needed?
right,
So, my point is, you have to look at what, the story behind the numbers. That's all. I'm
and one-
just raising that point.
Relatedly, in the sections you just described, pages 1 essentially through the top of 3, and if you look at all the comments, I mean, that's stuff that's almost entirely from the Joyce report. I mean, this is stuff that Dr. Joyce, basically, that's why you have going back to the percentage, in this section, probably your largest percentage increase over existing. Because these are the basic classrooms, essentially, that Dr. Joyce pointed out in his report back in October that are absolutely, absolutely necessary.
Necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, that sort of, and again, it's a good point to the person who's not thinking about this all the time. It's a balance. I mean, all the information's out there. This is in part why we're gonna have these public meetings, because this, to any of us, most of us, if you were to throw these things in front of you, they're difficult to put your arms around. So we're trying to give a summary, but also give everybody the detail if they really want to drill down into it.
So in terms of, when I think about alleviating some of the confusion there, and I just listening to the conversation, I think Skip's point is really important. So existing needs, new needs, if I was working on this in my realm of work, I would put together a narrative or a glossary of terms or something along the lines that kind of explain with perhaps examples. So for example, I think it would be very helpful to have something that talks about new needs, and that new needs aren't exactly adding additional programs, but the programs are actually running, but there is this need for new space. So that sentence itself is very clear. Something like that would be very
So-
helpful.
Absolutely, and if you look at page 4 of Mike Kennison's ed spec summary that he worked on and we tried to help with, there's actually a page of definitions for what each category means. We didn't put it on the summary sheet because it would become summary sheets.
Could we
So-
put it, is it a one, could we put it at the end?
It's basically a half a page.
So that's a good point. I mean, two good points here at least, is that, last time around, and this is again an attempt to clarify these things, we did and again, this is online from the meeting materials last time, because we recognized that for somebody to look at these spreadsheets is a daunting task, so we tried to summarize it and put those definitions in here. If it makes sense, and again, it's a judgment call as to how much information you put on a summary, we may be able to,
Summaries don't become summaries after a while.
the rules, yeah.
I think there's a way to
Put them in
approach
there.
this. Yeah,
You could
and-
put them up front. I mean, they're not terribly wordy, so it's.
Well, we worked on them together to try
Yeah.
to get them concise, and they're about a half a page, but we could,
I think
We
there's
could
some
put it
others
in
too,
there.
and as we go through this, I sit here and I'm trying to figure out, is there an analytical framework? And the answer seems to be, no, there isn't. And there's exceptions to the things once you understand. And as for example, if we have an 800 square foot room, and the requirement's 900, but 800 will satisfy and we'll be able to get an exception so we don't have to move each room. And if there's no other reason to touch the room, we wouldn't touch the room, okay? If there's a way to go through this at some point and say, let's take a swipe, we may not be perfect, but here are the rooms that probably won't require much work at all because of either variances or whatever. What does the rest of the picture look like? Because I think where people need to get is, some of that's done in the summary. We need 7 classrooms, or we need 3, science classrooms. The percentages may mean stuff. They always did to me, okay? But it's just one piece of information. You have to get behind it. I'm interested in tipping points. For example, when you end up speaking about the high school, and the reason I bring this up is sort of on the summary basis. You don't want the summary to be too long. So if I wanted other people to get educated as to what the key issues were here, what were the key things that are either going to drive the financials or issues that we have to drive with, I'd want to give them 2 or 3 pages so they know the big picture and feel comfortable, and then if they want to drill down, they can drill down to the umpteenth level going through the rest of the stuff. But if they really wanted to spend 20 minutes finding out what the key issues were. So if there are things in here, I'll give you an example. If you don't add classrooms to the high school, assuming you choose to renovate for art, but you take the Perkins building and you do some work on that to say, there's a way to provide space, but it's not contiguous space, and what's the cost of renovating Perkins into an art center versus building 6 classrooms and what over here, it may be a couple of $1 million difference, and people may want to say, oh, I can see that, we can provide the service, but maybe not in the perfect sense. Another one, and then I'll shut up, but the high school seems to be this crazy quilt, the way it's been built. And I'm still confused about how an elevator can stop 5 times in 2 floors, but I'm still working on that. But if the high school space, because it's been built like a quilt, is so much more difficult, so when you say there's, 800 square feet, it may be 300 here connected to 200 that goes sideways through another room and 300. How do we get a sense whether the high school says you can't trust the square footages, you have to step back and see a whole larger space? In other words, whether that's the tipping point, or you have to get out all the walls and start over again. You may have the square footage, but you need to redesign. Those are the things that you guys are going to know that
Exactly.
we're not, and I think that would be, here's a great cost savings idea if you're interested in, here's a way to enhance the space, and build on it.
Well, that's, if I may, that's the exciting thing about the juncture that this process is at this moment, is we're having some really important key meetings about establishing a base criteria for what the needs are. And then, and with the existing square footage verification that we're doing, we're going to start to be able to bring those two things together and guide you through what your options are. And all of that is on the table. You're absolutely, I think this is wonderful because you're talking about the natural next step.
And these are our targets, but in reality, because we have existing spaces and because we're probably going to need some variances, because we're not going to move all the walls, the actual numbers will come down from this. So this is just a target.
I think we're on page 3.
We are.
That was all good, though. Yep.
That's terrific. And I'm going to try to go quickly here because we have a lot of other items on the agenda. But we did some clarification on page 5 for the sped behavior square footages. The room was misidentified, and the size was a little bit too big, so it's now 200 square feet. We changed the Zendens to intervention on the next page, and then on page 8, I believe, we have a better idea of which portion of that back space is cold storage and regular storage versus freezers and so forth, so that's great.
If I can step back to page 7, taken out from that is consistent with the school board's discussion over a week ago, is the auditorium and the related spaces. Again, the school board discussed this. We thought it makes sense to carve that out for separate consideration and perhaps ultimately a separate warrant article if it, at the end of the process, that makes sense. But more analysis needs to be done on that. The wisdom, we think, in that is that, there are a lot of opinions on that, and strong ones. And it's a big space. It's potentially in a very expensive space. Good opinions on both sides. And that's true for Newmarket. When we went out and visited other schools and talked to other architects, it seems to sort of be the linchpin of these projects, and the idea there is not to have the whole thing hang on that one issue and to give people choices, ultimately. So that's sort of the quick explanation of our thinking there. So if somebody's comparing the next prior version to the existing or the most recent draft, that's why you don't see that there, so.
Well, and since we're on the topic, I was saving it to the end, but I think better to just wrap that up.
Yep.
What we did was we took the performance and assembly space and the drama spaces and coupled them so they're all as one alternate square footage. So that needs a little verification from the committee and from the principals that was an appropriate grouping.
So just for clarification, I understand kind of the taking out the auditorium space, but does that mean that if there's a drama space, that program goes away if there's no space for drama programs in either iterations of different models?
That's what we're asking.
Yeah, this is entirely however you want to structure this. That's exactly why we'd like to know what you think.
I'm assuming, to
That's a
answer your
high
question,
risk.
I'm assuming if your question is, would you still have the drama support space if you wanted to have that, but you weren't going to go for the size auditorium or the auditorium? I would assume you can move it out of that and say, we need
Yeah.
2 additional rooms for drama, but not the, 400-person auditorium.
Well,
I
we
don't
could-
think they're connected that
Could
way,
take,
are they?
well, it's entirely how you want to structure it, and we could take a couple of, or whatever selective rooms you would like from the alternate and move them back into the base building program. And group however you think is appropriate. It's your ed spec.
Yeah, I think it's important to state we're not, even thinking about trying to get rid of a drama program or music or any of that stuff. That's not even on the table. To be clear about that, it's just, at least in this iteration, that stuff was moved out separately. We can move some of it back in. I think in all events, that, the auditorium that was in the prior version, at least in the prior draft, probably needs to stay out for separate consideration. I think that was sort of the thinking. We can talk more about this at the meeting on Thursday, and I think Meredith will have some thoughts on that particular issue, too, so.
A question, and it's better later on when we go through the site plans, is Perkins Building represented, I think it's like 911 square feet or something. Is that because that's all there is and we're using 100% of it? Or is the facility larger and we're only using a few rooms in it?
We're using the main floor, we're not using the basement really. So I don't believe the square footage includes a basement.
No, it's just the
Okay.
main floor, and it's used.
And
yeah.
my only question is just because it's a their thing, okay? And rather than rebuilding it as an alternative, you can say, can we redo the space there, or can we add to the space there? I'd like you to, I'm not sure that's come out as to what can you do with the Perkins space? Is it really double if you wanted to use the basement? And maybe all of a sudden you have a performing arts room you didn't know you had if you looked at the basement space and said, gee, we can put that in.
The headroom's pretty tight.
Yeah, and it may be. I have no idea what I'm talking about, other
Yeah.
than saying, I'd like to understand the Perkins building as, do you blow it up because it's just terrible, or can you work with this and provide, either additions or whatever? So,
Yeah, it'd be nice to know the age of the building and,
Yeah, and these are all good points, and ultimately, it's gonna start with us and the school board as to philosophically, what do you do with that space? Might it be used for something else? I think if we had a perfect world, we wouldn't have kids crossing the street, right? Even though the town's done a great job in a quick job in getting the crossings there and making the Carpenter property safe by clearing it out.
but I
But
feel
I
more
think-
comfortable that high school kids are at least able to go across the street. Hopefully they learn better by then than having the elementary schools having to travel across the street.
Yeah, but
So,
let's make a point to bring that up on Thursday, because I think that bears a little bit more discussion. I mean, I guess where I'm getting at is Ingrid and Brad can tell us what we could potentially do with it, but that's innumerable, right?
Right.
And you can make it into an office. You could do whatever. You keep it as it is, I suppose, but philosophically, I think they need our leadership as to what we'd even consider doing with it, so.
Brad, can I ask just to
Yep.
clarify? So
Please.
room 117,
what page is it?
and we're on page 4. So that's the current music band room that we have. That's currently where we do drama. So that new space of 2,400, would that include a stage, or that stage would be removed in that the stage portion of drama is in a separate spot?
the stage portion of drama was intended to be in a separate spot.
Okay.
So this is just
So,
for music.
so that question reflecting, could we do drama if we don't have a stage? in this current facility, as designed right here, would be no.
Right.
So you can't. So you need a performance space with a stage to be able to do drama. So that's a question that came up, is that I would say you
Sure.
would not be able to do drama if you
Right.
do not have a performance
And where,
type
by-
of center.
where, by the way, just quickly, where was that in the prior version?
The stage?
Page? Was it, I don't know if it was called such, was it?
I do believe we have we may have we may have lumped it in with the actual assembly space auditorium.
Yeah.
So it was on page 8.
That was the 4,000.
Actually, we had it as 2,000 square feet on page 8.
Oh, I see, yep,
Drama
yep,
stage.
there it is.
Yeah.
Room 117A. I think we ought to put that back in for analytical purposes
base.
now, the stage anyways.
Yep.
The auditorium is a whole separate thing unless,
Correct.
So we have,
just so the numbers are clear, right?
Yes.
so not to jump around, but as we're looking at the alternate spaces to go in order, there's a performance assembly, which, by the way, we made an adjustment to properly size that space to 4,500 square feet. It was shown at 4,000 at the last meeting. That was a typo. There's the controls room, which obviously would go with the assembly space. There's a green room, which I would assume you'd want to leave with the alternate with the assembly space.
Yep.
So stop me if there's something that should
No,
move back
those-
into the
no,
building.
Those can all stay with the assembly space, yep.
Set construction,
Assembly space.
okay, stage,
That needs to be in this,
Needs to
in the
be in
base.
both. doesn't it?
Okay,
yeah.
okay, and the storage.
Because if you got the auditorium, then the stage would be, so you wouldn't have two.
Right.
Right, right.
So, and the storage for the drama department would go,
We need storage.
Even though we've significantly increased,
That
Yeah.
increase for band is just for the number of kids and equipment that's
Right.
going on there.
right,
The 2,400, yep.
and isn't, in whatever renovation option we may come up with, that stage would be contiguous to the band?
Correct.
and lastly, there's a drama uniform storage room, which is theater clothing,
Yeah.
music clothing, so would
That,
that go in back in the building?
yeah, you could, I mean, that's not as important, because you already have one storage.
Okay, so that we'll leave that in the alternate, or, okay.
And then the only other thing is code-wise, a stage, if it's over, I think, 1,000 square feet, you have to have smoke doors and all of this bells and whistles go off versus, a platform, which if it's under 1,000 square feet, then you don't need all those additional code issues. So is that something you would want to kind of target, so the stage in our base is 1,000 square feet?
So if we took the existing stage and flattened it down to floor level,
It's the size.
I got you.
So, and you have flammable, and if it's a
Mhm.
large area where you can have a big set, then we'd have to add all the smoke doors.
Yeah, what did they find the stage as the performance space or the rooms off it as well?
Just the stage itself.
Okay, so if you're saying it's 25 by 40, which is 1,000 square feet, that sounds to me like it's a reasonably decent sized stage, I don't know.
I would want to bring in people who do
Yeah.
stage productions at the high school level to get a good
Yeah.
sense as to what they need and what.
Yeah.
what
I
they
just
need.
don't know
have to
what
ask.
number to put in here, you know. So we'll,
So let's
we'll
do
ask.
some
Yeah,
research.
I'll ask
Okay.
that question.
But that looks like it shifts a lot back into the, out of the auditorium side.
2,000.
That's what I'm hearing.
$2,000 square feet.
But it sounds like the stage has got its own little tipping point in there that says
Yes.
if you keep it 1,000, you can do it for this much and do something, and if you go beyond that, you could double the costs or whatever the requirements are.
So just for clarity, what is the research question for this, for the stage?
For the base bid for the drama that's contiguous to this music room, can the stage be 1,000 square feet? And
I
if it
see.
can't programmatically, that's fine, we just need to know, because then we need to add all the bells and whistles.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it just wouldn't make sense to build this and have it non-functioning, right?
1,000 square feet's pretty big, too.
Is it?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have a sense, I'm trying to figure out what 1,000 square feet looks like from the space behind it.
I would say it's like half of this room-ish. I mean, these are 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times 2.
Yeah, if you figure 20 feet deep by
Yeah.
50 feet across, that's
About
a
half
fairly
the size of this
decent.
room, which is pretty big.
It's pretty good. Put some Irish dancers on there.
What's,
I would agree, either you do it acceptably or you don't do it at all. Don't-
well, and one of the tricks to stages is it's not solely the stage itself that the audience sees, it's the wings.
I mean, this is a
So-
perfect example right here. This is a platform, it's not a stage. Legitimate stage is over 1,000 square feet, but this is probably, I don't know how far it goes back, but,
Probably about 15 feet. maybe.
yeah.
So there really
Tiny.
there's no wrong answer as to what size, it's what size is going to work for you. You know, are you going to have dancers leaping onto the stage and need the space to get all the way across the stage, or is it,
Yeah.
what kind of performances are you trying
Very wide.
to have?
You know, one interesting thing, just that, and again, we saw this, I think it was in Hanover, right? That the stage area, it didn't have this raised portion, it was flat, so you could add more seats or take some away, but it also had a different perspective to the audience. I kind of liked it, actually, because you were right there with them. Now, there may be some production issue or programmatic issue where you want it raised up, I don't know, but I hadn't seen one like that before.
Theater in the round, you know, when you need us.
So is the black box theater we're doing now. I mean, this, where it's just one big flat floor with risers for chairs. I mean, you know, so it's, so we're in the business of asking questions at this stage. One of my questions is, are there any music or performance-related spaces that are shown in the base building that belong in the alternate? Okay, so just,
Covered that water, I think, at this, yep,
excellent,
good
excellent.
question.
So, back to, we were somewhere,
Page 8?
I think we were on page 8, yeah. So, skipping right along, there aren't that many other changes. We deleted the admin secretary line because she's in the body of the office square footage. The art office is actually a special ed coordinator space, so that was appropriately assigned. And then at the very bottom, which was page 13 and is now page, well, it's the janitors. Yeah, so it is still page 13. We just did some appropriate labeling of different janitor spaces and what they are now, and making sure that we were much clearer on what was existing need versus wants for slightly larger.
And the
Utility
administrative
spaces.
space that we have in there, if I remember correctly, does not cover the superintendent's office or the
Correct.
space in this building. I'll bring up again, I think it's sort of remiss if we don't ask that question and get an answer, since as part of the capital improvement program and the wants and needs at that point in time, the town portion of our town was looking for additional and better space utilization in this building. And they thought that perhaps taking over the third floor, because there's storage, security reasons, things like that, may be useful. The school is thinking about redoing its facilities. I'd at least like to feel comfortable we've asked the question, and the school superintendent and staff are saying, no, we're committed to this building for another 5 to 10 years. It's, because I'd hate to think we left them out.
Maybe is that a question for Thursday, during the school board meeting?
You know, in terms of the town, school, big picture.
Well, yeah, if the town is saying, I really could use the third floor, and we're in the process of thinking about how to fit things in, I don't know what the square footage is on the third floor and what their needs are, but certainly sounds like we're putting plenty of storage into this thing. I'd just like to say we thought about it and didn't go, oops, we forgot the superintendent and the support structure over there.
I think we had in our early meetings, when we were trying to think out of the box and think about all sorts of different configurations, we had talked about perhaps moving SAU into a new facility or into, so that we had thought, there was discussions of that. Whether or not that's, I don't think we've gone beyond discussion, but, I mean, it's maybe something to float, because,
Yeah.
and I don't know what the town's needs are, and I don't know where the town is on that, so, I mean, I don't know whether we're talking out of turn and whether we're speculating or not, but that might be worth considering.
I don't have the answer, but I've heard the question a couple times, so I
Does
just
SAU
like.
own the, I mean, what kind of financial
They
relationship
have
do
a
they?
quarter ownership of this building, which they used to own as a whole. The parking out front is a little odd. The church
It's owned
owns
by
it.
the church
Can't
next door.
be out there during certain times, but out back, it's owned by the town, the parking out back. Well, for people who don't know, this used to be part of the town school system, this building. But that's it. I mean, they have a quarter share. They, meaning the SAU, have a quarter share. This is a good question. I think it's, in the first instance, it's maybe something we want to ask Meredith, because she knows better than anybody how a SAU office might be structured, in terms of what they might need for space versus what we're doing now. More, less, I don't know.
Well, and it's getting the town involved to, heavens to Murgatroyd, if that's an acceptable expression versus the ones I usually use, that we have the town and the school speak on a strategic basis about what their needs are. I mean, I'm not pitching the Perkins building for anything other than can we use it, but if you're saying to yourself, gee, I understand the superintendent wants to be separate and not in the pants of the principals on a daily basis and in the traffic flow, but we have a building right across the street that if we did a couple things to, we can move the superintendents and staff into their own building, et cetera, and be near enough and give Steve the space and satisfy that need, then I think that's great for the town. I just don't want to be here 3 years from now saying we have another $3 million problem that nobody ever thought about. So I don't know the answer, but I'd like to get the question answered.
I think it's a fair point, and something, I question again, that we might want to initially raise with Steve. I don't think we ever got to that during a
I
brief.
think the school board's got to talk to the town
Yeah.
council, or,
Yeah. Well, I
superintendent's got to speak to the administrator.
I think the town administrator, at least in the first instance, because he's going to have an idea about the spaces and whereas,
That's where these things came from,
Yep.
was
Okay.
speaking to the.
let's bring it up. I'll add that to the list, and I'd like to get Meredith's input on it. I mean, this is what she does, so she can look at the space and say, maybe, she's already seen it. I'm sure she has some thoughts on it. Okay, can I go back to page 8 of the new version?
Sure.
And it's the media center line item, and I recall, Ingrid, from the last meeting, you said that essentially most of the DOE regs are spot on in terms of reasonableness, but this one's a little behind the times. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because, the existing area is 1,300, and
Right.
we're talking about essentially doubling it. But that's based on the DOE standard as it exists.
Right.
Is that malleable?
Well, what's happened is, as, digital media has become more popular, books and sharing of books have become more popular, so media centers in schools are turning into learning centers, or they're morphing into different spaces. So this is one that really depends on your program needs, Chris, and we should really talk with the instructors and see what you're doing in there. Because I think you have a lot of accessory uses too that go around, that are covered in other areas. So that 2,600 could be heavy.
Well, just to speak to the raw numbers for clarity on the baseline, the media center with the extension media center combined is 2,500 square feet. So we're talking about an increase over the existing of 100 square feet. The 2,600 number literally comes from the state standard of so many square feet per pupil, so.
But there's also a lot of free open space in that existing space.
Would any of this be considered what we old people used to call the library back in the old days? And so, is that what the media center existing space is?
Yes.
Okay. Both of them, or library and reading room, or, but,
It's all the media center.
okay, but it was the library at some point.
And just a related thing, again, the benefit of seeing, I guess it was Lebanon Middle School. I don't know, Ingrid, if you explained it to us, or the principal that day, that they have a learning center there, and it's structured much different than our libraries, and that we knew, and it's used widely by the community frequently at night, so that's another sort of notion we might want to be thinking about here, for cross uses, and, but it's a large space, and we're seeking to double it, and I just, I want to make sure we're looking at that one real carefully. If that's the right size, that's the right size, but, maybe Meredith as well has some thoughts on that one, so.
But
Well, I thought he was
We're
saying-
only increasing that size by 100 feet, Mike?
100
We're not
feet.
doubling.
Because we're adding these two
Yeah,
at the
adding-
bottom
yes.
together.
Right.
Those two are side by side today, or something?
That is
It's
correct.
all connected.
Okay.
But even still, the point still
Right.
remains that it's, that space, that although the space is what it is, it's close to the total. Do you need that total space, right?
That's the question.
Right.
Okay, so it's not an additive, but it's just, can you reduce the space? I got you.
Yeah, in total, and is it a multi, it strikes me as maybe it's a multi, I don't know, you want to call it a multi-use space, but it has more use than a library, and maybe that's encompassed in the term learning center.
It gives you two classrooms.
Yeah.
With the computers of 24 banks of computers. You
Right.
have a class of 24 kids,
Yeah.
and kids taking online, all in one area, while there's another classroom being able to research, use the drop-down screen. So at any given time, you can have up to 50 kids learning in two different sections in these large sections of the class. So it is utilized properly with it, the way we've got it listed right now.
But flex space would be over and above being able to use that as flexible space.
Flex space would be different,
Right.
because they're doing so much more research in processing in this type of classroom, and the digital needs of the computers that are there. Then obviously all the books that are stored in there as well, so that does outright it.
Okay.
In this space, you gotta think, you have 7 different grade levels using 2,600 square feet.
And that's great. That's great. I think, maybe, and this goes again, Chris, we've tortured these comments enough, maybe, but I don't know if we put something if we could add something like that, maybe just a quick line on it, that brings it out, okay. Boy, now I understand. It's not an idle space. It's being used.
Well, and it's not a flex space that you could use in case you had like a spiky, or you couldn't put a class in there
built out.
because it's being used by all 7 grades.
Right.
And they need that rotating
Right.
capacity, that you wouldn't want to monopolize it by totally different
So
things.
these are just the things that you live with and are self-evident every day. The rest of us, boy, we're catching up on.
Yeah, and at this
Yeah.
time of the year, for the last 3 weeks, and the remainder of this week, it's been the testing center. So for state
Another-
testing, so
Yep.
3 periods out of the day, we're doing testing, and then we're doing makeup testing,
My
so-
daughter complains about it the whole ride in.
Yeah,
If it's testing, they can do that in the basement of the Perkins place.
Oh, But, well, no, but test,
No, just kidding.
so testing, again, back, it's not filling out ovals
quiet.
these days. It's on computers.
It is.
Yeah. so-
They may have preferred that to, I had some grumpiness with mine.
It's the Bunker Hill mentality. You need to take those standardized tests.
All right.
Are there any other questions or comments, concerns on the junior, senior high school?
I have none, but maybe, sort of a quick summary of where we were on the last prior version of, versus total square footage, where this version is at. And again, it's a draft, underlined draft. It's not finalized yet. There's a summary there at the top that I think people can look at, but the difference is substantial, in terms of removing, we're gonna put the 2,000-foot stage back in, but the numbers have come down a bit from the last version.
I have the same comment about the new needs and wants columns that I had for the elementary
Yep.
school.
So add that same note.
Anything else? We can move on. That took longer than I thought it would, but it was all good.
So did we want to say where we were with the high school square footage last time versus 119,311? Where were we last time?
I don't have it at my fingertips.
Okay.
I was avoiding
I
the
was
question.
giving, I was stalling, we were stalling for
He was
that.
giving me a pass.
Got it. Okay.
Well,
We-
Gary,
we
we'll
can
talk
come back.
about that at some
All
point,
right.
won't we, tonight, or later on? Talk about where we stand with this.
Yeah, this is a good segue into that. I mean, in terms of, you know, comparing sort of where we are with this draft of the ed specs, you know, to, you know,
I think I gave you mine.
the JEC report and the JEC range of numbers. I don't know if you can talk to that a little bit. And again, this is preliminary. I want to emphasize that. I mean, people should not take this stuff as gospel. I'd like others to weigh in on that as well, that this is an ongoing process, but this is sort of a, you know, we're putting our finger up here in the wind a little bit to see, you know, it's sort of a check. But it's also a reminder that, again, as I said at the beginning, that we're not heading down to the path of just trying to resolve the junior-senior high school issue for $45 million. We're not even in that universe at all. We're not close to it. We're, you know, as Ingrid will talk to, we're well below that. We're more in the JEC report range in solving both schools' issues. So,
Sure, do you have it?
I have the
All
numbers.
right.
I did find them.
Perfect.
So, where we, just to compare apples and apples, the grand total this week, this meeting, we're at 129,937.
For the whole
The whole
enchilada,
enchilada.
including,
including an
Including
auditor.
the auditorium.
That's just high school,
Assembly space.
high school,
Yes.
junior high?
Yes. And 2 weeks ago, we were, or 2 weeks ago, we were at 129,136. So we're talking about 800 square foot adjustments, 500 of which is fixing the assembly space number from 4,000 to 4,500, and the remainder being a grouping of minor adjustments, including properly identifying the cold storage and the kitchen and a bunch of little things.
but our base number now for the junior, senior high is 119,311, with an alternate that we're calling this auditorium performance space.
Correct,
I
and the 119 will go up by a little bit now that we've moved a few of the functions back into the base building.
Right. And it may come back down after we have another session on Thursday, but I just want to give, but in addition to the comparison of this process and these ed specs, I think people, and it's in my summary, it's in the materials and it's up online, a comparison overall of prior proposals, back in, I think it's 2014, that bond vote, it was 151,000 square feet, I think was the total proposal. That included taking an auditorium and a gym out, and don't quote me on this, but I think before that happened, the square footage was up around 170,000 square feet in that iteration. Before that, back in 2008 or 6, or whatever the golf course, I'll call it, proposal was, that was a 200,000 square foot proposal. So we're now not being finished at 119,000 square feet. I'm talking just about the junior, senior high school, too. Just so people have a big picture understanding of what we're working at right now, so.
Yeah, and as Mike knows, because I've been pushing in conversations with him, it's not to get a right answer, because I think it's way too early. But we have a lot of people who remember the $45 or $50 million prior proposal. I'm not even sure square footage, though it's a measure, saying, gee, if it used to be 170,000 and now we're down to 20, we can all pat ourselves on the back saying, we took out 50,000 square feet. But if you have 45 million in the past, and just trying to remember numbers we've used before, in the 18 to 25 million was your hopes with I thought of an ad reno with both the high school and the elementary school when you took both into account. If we're in that same ballpark today, okay, if we're, a few $1,000,000 more, that's going to be a lot more enlightening, big picture-wise, to people than saying we're back up to 40 because we've added a second school. So there's some big questions there, and I'd just like to be able to start to herd, into a ballpark where we can have a good dialogue rather than people saying, the cost is doubled, we're back where we were, or we can get 2 for the price of 1, or it's only $7 million, let's approve everything, we don't have to spend time on this.
Sure. So I'd like to speak to that in a way of comparing it to a recent new school that we've built. We're going to be looking at many different options when we're looking at the solutions to providing this program that we've been working on. But the Lebanon Middle School was about 110,000 square feet. It's about 10,000 square feet less than the 119,000 square foot base target that you currently have here. And in 2012, the total project cost for 110,000 square feet was $24.5 million.
And that's new and.
Brand new, chip
Site prep as
school.
well?
Site was about $4 million, so it was heavy, 3 fields, parking spots for 100 cars, separate bus loop, separate parent drop-off loop. It was on a sloping site, so we had a lot of water issues, stormwater detention, a brand-new vacant site, just like you have here. We had to pay for wetlands mitigation. I think it was somewhere in the $80,000 range for wetlands mitigation. So with 119,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet, ballpark at $200 a square foot, which is high, is about $2 million. So somewhere in the $27 to $29 million is kind of worst case for a new school if you do a lot of site work. So big picture.
That lot, as I remember, or that area was like building on Machu Picchu. I mean, it was.
It was.
It was.
Yes.
It was steep. And that's a valid point. There was $4 million worth of site work
Yeah.
there. I wouldn't, boy, Mark, you
Yeah.
can speak to this better than I can. Ballparking, I wouldn't imagine we'd have that much work on our property.
Definitely not on that lot.
But I assume with the reno, if you weren't going to build new as an alternative, that site work, whether it was only $2 million or $4 million, would pretty much disappear out of.
And to head off sort of speculation, because we're using this as a comparison, we're not heading in that direction, we're not
Right.
heading in a new direction. We're considering both. At the end of the day, when we're done our analysis, there's going to be a list of both of them. They're going to, initial cost is going to be one thing, and it's going to be pros and cons of each. On the new, you're going to have a building that lasts 50 years. On an ad reno, it'll be building that lasts substantially less than that. On the new, you don't have disruption of the program for 2 or 3 years. On an ad rental, you have that. And it's going to go on and on and on. It's probably going to be 20 or 30 of those things for people to consider. Our point here is to get those facts to people, and get them to people in sufficiently in advance of a bond vote, so they can weigh in and make those choices. So, I can't control how people will interpret what we're doing here today, but I just wish they, take a breath, really listen to what we're saying, okay? We've provided some clarity today, sort of I guess a reality check, where we're at, and we're not going one way or the other, but we'd be failing the school system, we'd be failing the town if we didn't consider them both, and if we didn't give people choices, and we didn't give people the information to look at. So that's really what this is all about, and there always is welcome public input. There will be we're gonna bug people to death in terms of public input. We're going to provide, sessions where people can come on camera, off camera, whatever they're comfortable with. But, it's really, I'm repeating myself, this is due diligence. It's not choices at this point. We got to get the facts out so people can make real choices, not speculate or have suspicion. We've got to remove that. Go ahead.
So Mike, I'll just say I'm blown away by the numbers, the square footage numbers that we've for the 2006 bond versus the 2013 bond, which is what we're sitting here today. And I just wonder if we go back and just think about the 2013 bond, I mean, at least 40, maybe 50, 60,000 square feet that is no longer there. Part of me says, wow, we've done a great job of trimming these things down, but there's another part of me that says, oh my God, what did we lose? What was there that is no longer, I mean, 20,000 square foot here, you know, where, do we have a sense as to what has been trimmed?
Want to know?
I mean, I don't want to go into infinite detail, but, you know, kind of the overview picture, because there must have been.
That's a great question. I mean, it just begs the question, you know, are we cutting things out just to get this thing down to a level where we think would pass? That is not the object here at all. It is to take this is why we hired Dr. Joyce at the very beginning of this whole process. So we had somebody come in who didn't have any dog in the fight here, who could come in, who's well-respected, and could sort of give us a picture of what you guys actually need. And even before that, we had Randy Bell do it, okay, as part of the JAC process, a joint town, you know, school board effort. So there's been a lot of eyes on this. It's a fair question, like, what were we doing before? You know, if we can cut this much space, then what happened last time? I can't go item by item and compare it off the top of my head.
I'm not sure you want to.
It's an interesting exercise, but I'm fairly confident after all this vetting, the JEC vetting, Dr. Joyce's vetting, independently, our vetting, that we're not selling things short, that, you know, we've, in a lot of, and Ingrid can weigh in on this, this is a typical path for these things, unfortunately. There's 3 or 4 votes, and at some point, you get down to reality. You know, it's unfortunate it has to, but that's sort of the history of these things.
If you look at the process of where we are now, I think, I look at this as still a significant bottoms-up process where the principals, okay, have spent a lot of time on the educational specs and the professionals, and, you know, this cries, every duchy has their space and room, and we're not having, you know, 5 professionals with different backgrounds sharing the same space. So I feel comfortable that, other than the issue of auditorium or not auditorium or how big it's going to be, that this seems to be the space. I'm interested in what Meredith, our new superintendent, has to say from her experience, and what she sees here, because she's lived with her own reality for lots of years. And the school board's already weighed in a little bit on maybe the auditoriums one way or the other, but it seems to have moved back today. But from a bottoms up, I think it's fine. I think people will still have questions. The answer from the past is, I'm not sure why it was what it was.
It's funny, this week I had 2 different conversations with 2 different staff in 2 different high schools, and both of them have new buildings that are completely over capacity. New buildings that they have run out of space completely. And so I keep thinking, oh, we're not going to do that. But I just, when I heard those numbers, Mike, I get a little, I just don't want to build something that doesn't work.
It's the elephant in the room,
Or-
you know, in terms of, if you look at the whole history of this thing, you know, how the heck could we have been at some point at 200,000 square feet? Admittedly, back then, I think we were at the peak of our enrollment over 20 years. It was 100 kids higher.
Plus you had Durham and Epping that appeared, at least up until a year ago, had somewhat overbuilt based on the specs and the educational requirements and the new requirements, et cetera.
And so the thing of it is I think Ingrid has said it repeatedly, and Brad said it too, is that it's about building for flexibility. I mean, not being able to know precisely what the future holds. So you build your core spaces adequately. You build your gyms, your cafeterias, and your other spaces that are in the central part of the building, which you can't feasibly expand after the fact. And then you allow for flexibility if, the population projections don't work out. You know, we've discussed that ad nauseum, but I think that's the answer to that, risk question. You build it with flexibility in mind.
Well, and if I can comment on, if I'm remembering the Lebanon School correctly, that what sticks in my mind is what I will call an undersized cafeteria. That they had to make some choices.
They
and
did.
They took the space out of the cafeteria, and it showed when we were there. And, which just points out the importance of getting the core spaces right, properly sized. That was a beautiful school. They had everything, but they still do have undersized cafeteria.
It was tight.
Yeah, it was tight, but
But what's interesting as well, too, is they had built this, a gymnasium, was a full-size,
Right.
basketball gym, but they had the stage off of it, kind of like they used to do.
Right.
Which is what we had at the high school. It's now the stage. That was the gym and the stage. But that was specifically designed, so if they needed more classroom space, so that you could bang out, I think there's the back
wall.
of the theater.
Right.
And add space there. It was part of the design. I think that's what we need to be thinking about, here as well. I mean, not that particular design, but where would we put things if we needed to? And it may be another factor on that list. I mean, it may be that the existing site somewhat limits us. Who knows? I don't know, Lynn, if that, I mean, your question's a good one, because it's one I thought of. I mean, but another way to compare this, and I can start, you weren't part of the initial process in reviewing the architect materials, is to look at actual schools and what their enrollments are. And I don't know what Lebanon, what their enrollment is.
540 kids.
It's what we have, But then it begs the question, is it working out, When you went to lunch, are they fighting over space, But, I haven't heard any major
I haven't heard any major.
complaints, but so that's another way you can kind of get a sense and compare things.
I'm trusting we would have heard from our principals by now if the space was real short
Yes.
of what they needed, so.
Right.
I'm using them as the professional saying, I'm comfortable if they're saying, this is what I need, we could quibble, but I have a feeling they're satisfied with what they put.
And I just want to make the comment that I think that the time that has been taken in the recent past to work on these ed specs has been time extremely well spent. And it gives me a good level of confidence in the content and the appropriateness of these, what these specs say. So I mean, I think it was a great job done at both schools. And let's face it, it's the foundation of the whole thing. So I know I have a good sense of confidence that they're quite appropriate. There's always going to be some tweaking.
Right.
No.
That's right.
Good.
So, somehow I've lost my agenda.
We've got number 1 done.
We're moving right along.
I can do 2 very quickly.
Okay.
So basically, we had 2 guys from our office come down for 3 days last week, and they went through all spaces in both of the schools. So now they're busy at work getting that information and utilizing the plans that Mike found in, I think, a closet upstairs here. So with the combination of those plans and the measurements, in a couple of weeks, we will have everything into the computer, which will be great. So then, the next work starts the fun part, where we take all of your goals here, and we do what Russ was suggesting, and for the renovation option, going through to see where it makes sense to keep the walls, and it will be a back and forth. We'll come, show you options, we'll go back and forth, until we develop some options to take to the public. There were no red flags, there were no things that stood out, or, oh my God, we didn't know about this. They did look at the mezzanine at the elementary school, so we're gonna be looking at that, because we've heard, why can't we use that space? So we'll be looking at that, as well as the Perkins building. So we're gonna uncover and do as much as we can to see what you have for your facilities.
Just a quick question. You did the high school ballpark if it was new.
Yes,
at your
Correct.
27,
Worst
29 rate,
case.
whatever.
most conservative.
Is there a number for the elementary school in your mind based on the specs that are
That's
out there?
harder. I mean, it's because it's a blend of addition and renovation. I mean, ballpark, we have about, is it 15,000 square feet? 15,805 area added to the building.
Well, it's deceptive. It may be more
Plus
like
the
21
6,000.
because you
Right,
have
so
Okay.
Portables.
four portables.
So, and this is off the cuff, off a napkin
Well,
here.
Brad, that's why I wanted to bring up that extra 5,000. It's
Yeah.
new space we need to replace old space we're getting rid of.
So, for construction only, no site work, no soft costs, no fees, no anything, 21,000 times 180 a square foot, a little lower, that's 3.78 million, just for the addition. So 4 million.
So
for
if
the
you said
addition.
4 to 6 million range,
4 to
it's
6 million.
comfortable
Yeah.
for the elementary. Last stupid question, if I can try to tag you into it, is if you did reno on the high school, is that a
That-
factor of 150 to 23% of what new is? I mean,
It depends on what you do. We know you're gonna need a whole new mechanical system. We know you don't need an elevator. We know the gym floor is new.
maybe now's the time to add the stage.
And then the locker rooms, we probably won't do much to. So I don't want to throw out a number there in terms of a renovation cost, but it's somewhere 20-ish. I mean, maybe less. It
Okay,
depends. It
but you're
depends on.
saying, again, a factor of maybe 2/3 of the
Yeah.
cost of new.
Yeah, that's big picture, sure.
The numbers aren't pretty
Yeah.
easy for me to work in my head, but I think.
What was the elementary school number?
4 to
4 to
6.
6.
46.
She was on the 4 range, I added 2. Well, I had 3 if you want.
Yeah, and I just feel the need to, because these things can get tortured to death. These are preliminary, we're not locked into anything. Again, they may go down as we, frankly, as we further review the junior, senior high version. They may go, I don't see them really going up, but we just wanted to give people a sort of a range of where we're at, you know, with this. We're not in the $45 million ballpark, or even close to a total for both schools combined. So, for whatever it's worth at this stage, I thought that would be helpful for people to understand.
Absolutely. I think it is, only to the extent that, and again, you're working with 33 million and under. You're at 18 to 24, you may be somewhat in the same range, you may be a little higher, but it's for 2 schools, not 1. I'm not saying approve everything blindly, but at least you're not having people running out of the room screaming and pulling their hair out. We addressed 1 school in the last round, we're addressing 2 schools now, and we seem to be fairly consistent with what you guys said, both for the JAC and having that reviewed as far as the ballparks.
And, boy, again, if anybody doesn't believe us, maybe we ought to get some of those comparables like that we had from the architect proposals up online, which gave the dossiers for each building, you know, how much square footage and what it costs. And these are all things that are within the past 5 to 10 years. So you can kind of, it's almost like looking through a local real estate magazine. You kind of can get a feel of what the asking prices are. I think maybe it would be helpful, and we should work on getting that up online for people. Because it's the same question you just asked, Dylan. I mean, how could we have been at 45 million and now we're down to, you know, to where this range for both schools?
Well, and there was a conversation I think that we had, I want to say in October, maybe November, about now that we have the details, we're in the weeds and stuff, that we can do a cost estimator that gets us really close at some point in time, so we can have a really clear understanding of where we are in terms of price, so we're not thinking give or take 5 million. Right, you're right.
And then there'll be a menu, I think, at the end of things, too. We've already talked about one big menu piece in terms of the auditorium and the wisdom in carving that out, if it comes at all on a separate warrant article, but there may be other things of that when we go through the smaller pieces likely that when we go through this, that the prices are put on and choices are made. None of this stuff, a lot of it isn't black and white. And that's, I think, where public input comes in and feedback, you know, what do people value, without compromising the program.
Right, and also, to your point, and I don't know if this is fair, I know that time value of money, if we decide to build something like an auditorium 5 years from now, the old theory was it would cost a lot more than it does today. The last 7 years, it actually costs less because there's no work and people were, so I can't predict that. But in your building a structure that is, as you said, you can add on to it in the future. You're planning that in advance. Is there that significant a cost difference in being able to add something in the future if you take into account, here's where you'd add it?
Oh, I mean, it's basically doing a master plan of all of your facilities of what you want, and you're phasing them in, which I think is smart.
So in real dollar terms, the whole startup cost and all that kind of stuff, if you're planning it in advance, it's really not that
Right.
much more than
It's-
your construction to begin with, other
No.
than the time.
Well, there's an economy of scale, of course. If you're building it all at once, you're
Yeah.
gonna get a better price, but beyond that, no.
Okay. That's my job.
All right.
I ask questions.
So, I think in the essence of time, we would like to, because our next step, now that these ed specs are getting there, we would like to just review both of the sites, or all three of the sites, if you will, just to kind of get our minds back into what we're working with, the new information that we found on the Carpenter property. Are we still calling it that? Okay.
Yep.
So that when we go and start doing our options, we can kind of get a jump start on where we're at with our site plans. So, we'll start with, which one do you want to start with? Elementary school, high school?
Elementary school,
Elementary school, all right.
start at the beginning.
That's where I'm supposed to start.
So this one? Yeah. Yeah, all right. So can everyone see this? Should I bring it closer?
Put it up on that chair.
It's a little cold in here, so I'm keeping my coat on. So here's our property line. So the McGrath property has been purchased or optioned?
It's under a purchase and sale agreement.
Okay.
And it's, yes, but won't close until summer.
Okay.
Yep.
And so, the big issues that we are grappling with are parking, separating the playground from the parking areas, separating the bus and parent drop-off for both schools. Probably no site utilities, Mark? I'm assuming the water and the sewer and electrical, I mean, it's not a big addition that
We'll
we're
have to deal
adding.
with some of the additional drainage from additional parking, but
Okay, so stormwater drainage, so do you know if there are any stormwater detention either underground or ponds
I
here?
don't believe there are.
So nothing, okay.
No.
So that's a big issue that we should be aware of, that could be a cost issue.
Ingrid, is the dotted line behind I assume the lower side is the back road? Is that dotted line include the easement that we've gotten as well?
This does not right now. So do we have that easement now? Is that set?
It's in progress.
It's in progress,
In
okay.
progress,
yeah.
So that is another piece that we should get onto this plan.
Yeah, at least there's a dotted line,
Yep.
so we see what the impact is.
Great point.
There is a previous drawing for that,
Okay,
great.
that exists. yeah.
okay. So what else in terms of site that we should know about as we're, obviously, you know, addition-wise, we have a little space here. There's, I know, a kind of like a little brooky area down here, so we can't come too far this way. We could come out the front if we had to. We could, this kind of is a possibility. We could come off the end here, too.
I thought the C entrance it's there, but it wasn't used regularly, or is it used regularly?
This
Yeah.
entry?
That's
That's the McGrath.
That's the
Yeah.
house.
That's the house.
Oh, you meant this entry here?
Yeah, I mean, normally egress is through that one area, I thought.
Through,
No.
it existing is through here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Potential is through, well, actually through both, you know. areas.
Well, we're hoping that we can utilize, where are we
Oops, so
here?
it's right here. This is the
Right.
existing one.
So the McGrath, is right here, right?
Yeah.
And by shifting over this, we're able to pull the playground inboard of all the traffic, which would be just wonderful. And it allows us just play field opportunity and building addition opportunity, so.
So I know Sean was very concerned about parent pickup and drop-off and bus pickup and drop-off.
Right.
So in looking at this, do you have in your mind a
We need to work
plan?
on that.
Okay.
This isn't the solution. So I think we had talked about pulling this road and pushing the parking forward, so they're dropping off on the other side, but we'll do some options for that. I would think one way, parents could come in here and drop off, and then buses could come in here and drop off here.
When meeting with Sean and some of the educators, the concern, some of the concerns raised were if we used the rear for the parent pickup and drop-off, it's a little less controllable when you've got kids out there. They didn't want the parents to be used to driving out back because they actually use it for PE as well. And they have little kids on bikes and so forth out there. So there was some discussion of, and it was just discussion of, should the buses be going around the back? Because that's more intermittent and
we
more
need-
controllable.
And we need to figure out how many cars come at one time, how many buses are at one time. Maybe there's a scenario where if there's only a few parents, which I can't believe, because most parents drive their kids to school, or if there's maybe just a few buses, we could use this as an in and out, and then this could be one. So, yeah, we'll draft up some options.
And that's actually one of the questions that we need to talk to both principals about, is we really do need a count of parent drop-off and pick-up. How many cars are we really talking about?
Anything else with this site before we leave it? Okay. So the high school, it's another very tight site, but Claremont was actually a tighter site than this was. So again, your property lines are here. Right now, this is the ingress and around and out. And then this is the bridge that goes to the fields. So you've used every single square inch in order to park. You don't really have any indoor-outdoor spaces that are nice. It'd be nice to get some in there for outdoor eating or waiting. We had talked about, too, separating the parent and bus drop-off and possibly doing something at the front of the school, so we'll be looking at that.
That was Claremont, right?
That was Claremont, exactly. We had both the parent drop-off and the bus drop-off in the front, and the front was much skinnier than what you had.
Used every inch of that.
We used every inch of that.
Real simple, too. I mean,
Oh, yeah, it was great.
Just a pull-off.
It was just a pull-off, and I don't think it bogged down traffic at all. It just wasn't much space there, but it was well utilized.
So we're going to probably be getting rid of that garage, so do we move it somewhere? What can we do with it will be one of the questions we ask. We can do additions here, infill in here. We could do an addition here. Also, we talked about the main entry issue, because right now, you kind of have to go around, and the main entry is kind of in the back, and it's just a
Strange.
funky,
No curb appeal.
no curb appeal.
Zero.
Security's horrible.
And strange in terms of, I was picking up and dropping off the other day, and it was raining, and it was just mayhem.
Right.
It's, if, you wouldn't know this unless you have a teenage or kid maybe, that, when you come in here for a dance or anything, you're waiting like up here in your car, then you gotta, it take a half an hour to get around here to pick up, because they go one by one by one.
It was 20 minutes from the
And-
time I pulled into the
Yeah.
time.
If you took that, you said that little box is a storage area?
This area.
Yeah, I'm just, if you move that off campus into more of the town space, if they had space where the ball fields were and it didn't create any, does that give you any better flow or? I don't know what we're storing there, but I'm just thinking it would be nice if the town and the school cooperated and maybe there's a place for a storage shed that's only 200 yards away if somebody needed to get to it. I don't know.
What about moving parking? You know, because there is.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like in some conversation, we talked about that parking lot as something that floods.
There's
Are
a
there water issues in
floodplain, so
It
this is in the
did.
floodplain, so it can.
Yeah, and the flood, it was all the way up to the back of the gymnasium.
Right. That's why this is so much higher.
And they don't speak to it.
Finish
Which
floor
was
is
9 years,
higher.
8 years ago?
That was an
Ten-
issue,
Mother's Day flood?
Brad Mosquito was talking about
Mm-hmm.
that, I think, when we toured that, and I think that was a downstream issue that's been fixed. So even if we had another Mother's Day flood, Mother's Day rain, I don't think that would happen again.
200-year
But there's also
floods we had in 3 years.
parking lots on the
But,
side.
you know, believe it or not, I read through all the DOE regulations, and they specifically address this floodplain issue, and from how I read it and interpret it, we comply as is, because the building's high enough, the foundation where it is high enough. Obviously, you don't want to flood in your parking lot, but it was interesting to note that it would comply.
Do we have a sense as to where the floodplain is? Because it looks like, I mean, if you're talking about adding on to space,
Basically, back in this low area is what Brad Mosquito
What's
had
that,
said.
Moonlight, is that Moonlight Brook?
Moonlight Brook, yeah.
We, due to the property line, we couldn't necessarily come back and go all the way there. It would be, so,
so you're really looking at if there was a addition
there.
component, it would be there, or in what now is the
Here, here.
front entrance
Right.
area.
right. I mean, this is where your front entry is now. This is the back of the building. You're not gonna have an entry here, so the really logical is putting it back in the front.
Right.
And so if you're putting the entry there, then either your parent drop-off or your bus drop-off should be here, if that's where you're made it.
Are there any guidelines about how close automobiles should come to the building?
You know, you want 10 feet. I mean, at Claremont, they paved right up and they parked right next to the building. It's an urban site.
It's much more in Newmarket to have the front entrance on the side of the building, just like Town Hall, you know, the parking lot's
That's true,
owned by
you're
the
right,
church,
you're
and
right.
that parking lot is this, and the third.
I'd certainly like to change that,
Yeah.
I for one.
Well, the way it's organized presently inside the school is such a disconnect between the administration space and the main entrance, and I think that's a real opportunity. And
To change
as we
that.
Look at this to fix it, yeah.
You know, in Claremont, they spent a lot of money on building that glass enclosed bridge entrance
Right.
to the building because the land went
Right.
down. And, but it kind of changed the perception of that building.
Good.
And so I just, in thinking about the main entrance coming back to the front of the building, I just think it behooves us to spend enough time thinking about the design of that entrance
Oh, yeah,
and how it's perceived driving by.
right.
Not that, you know, you don't have to spend a lot of money to do something like that, but I just think that we need to put enough thought into it to make it become a focal point for that building. Because if you look at the facade going down the road, it's a pretty long facade. And I don't think I wouldn't want to lose the front entrance in driving by. I'd
Right,
like to know it's there.
right.
Well, and
Just my thought.
To your point, I don't think that's hard to do.
No,
mean,
I
you
don't.
know,
I don't think it's hard to do. But I'd like us to pay attention to it, that's all. It's my 2 cents.
And with this option too, we still have the other side of the street, so maybe we can alleviate some of the congestion in the parking and maybe staff parks over here. So that we have more green space and indoor-outdoor spaces. Just a thought. But yeah, we're bound by the street, property line here, property line there. There's only so much you can do, and we should leave areas for future expansion. if we can.
Chris, how many staff do you have?
Just under 100.
And is there anybody else utilizing the parking except for the staff?
What was the question?
Buses.
We park 5 buses there.
So if you put
Yeah.
staff parking across the street,
Oh,
how
for
many people
sure.
would be crossing
And
the
it looks
street?
like 201 spaces.
Yeah.
So you basically, you could take half and put it over there.
We have close to 70 student drivers.
So, yeah, so 100 spaces here, 100 spaces there.
That would
Would-
open up a fair amount
It
of
would,
space.
it really would.
So, when we're talking about parking and traffic flow, my curiosity is this curb cut right here and this building, that's.
Lamprey Healthcare?
Every healthcare, yep.
So what's the goals in terms of maintaining that connection and keeping it?
Is there an easement
Clear.
probably?
Is that a fire access thing, or,
Not sure.
I don't know. I don't know.
I would say we'd have to keep
Is,
it.
is it a deed thing, not an actual access? Is it
I
just,
think we need to look at it.
Oh, was that a planning board thing?
Access and
When they-
parking
when-
easement.
When they approved that Lamprey site, was it an access thing? Like, you know, they try to,
Yeah.
all the commercial spaces along 108 or whatever, or any highway, they try to have a access road without going back out onto the main road. But what was the note you just said?
Says access and parking easement, see note 9B.
it may be.
There's a parking easement
Yes,
on the school.
it's on this side, so,
It's
I don't know.
Lamprey, you're saying.
Somebody's got an
use
easement, somebody's got an
property.
easement.
yes.
I wasn't aware of that. That's something to know.
It's just something we're gonna have to respect. I mean, certainly we can work around it, it's in the corner.
Do we have more parking than we think, or do we have less? I guess we'll know when we read the easement.
Right.
If there's a flu outbreak, it might be less.
Okay, any other things on the site that we should know? Any special trees that are donated?
Oh, they cut down a big tree in front, I was bummed, it's right here, I guess it's too late,
All gone?
unfortunately. And there's a beautiful 200-year-old oak right here, but that's
Uh-huh.
not on the property, but.
Okay.
So the only question that I have,
The answer to that is there any, like, memorial trees out there?
Not that we're aware of, no.
so the only other question I have is when we were doing these deliberations in 2013 and 2014 about renovations and stuff, there was lots of discussion, and I'm sorry I don't remember the specifics about, like oil tanks and the integrity of those and concerns about that, drainage under the building. That there was just a lot of concern about the infrastructure of the, and whether or not it was going to be able to last if we did renovate it. So that maybe we were asking, so yes, you fix up the building, but that the tanks were going to corrode away, and that there was potential, someone said there's something about drainage right underneath the building that may
Yeah.
pose.
There typically are. There were in Claremont, Wyndham. Yeah. You just have to camera them, inspect them, make sure they're not broken. Typically, if you have things backing up, that's a symptom of something being broken, or.
So would we do a lot of investigation of all those potential hazards and maybe potential?
Not all, but we try to pre-bond, try to get our arms around the biggest things that we think may be a problem, because, we can't afford to look at every little bitsy thing, but,
Just an example, I
Yeah.
think there's one or more on USTs right here, underground storage tanks
Yep.
for the existing system.
Right, that's standard.
Yeah.
To
do you
look
have a
at-
hazmat study, a phase two?
I don't know if there's an environmental phase one on the property.
We should get that, because
But we've
that,
had some tank issues, so they've had to do some, remember before the last plans suggested that this building wasn't renovatable. And that perception has changed in the last 6 to 9 months as it's potentially renovatable. So, yeah, you need to do environmental work and boring samples and core samples in a couple of places to make sure.
okay. Anything else with this one? Okay,
But I would tend to think that's a problem we need to know about now, rather
Yes.
than if there are no problems, it's not a significant issue.
right. And the reason why like in Claremont, we had estimated, I think, $250,000 of hazmat, lead, asbestos, and it ended up costing $400,000. So, there's only so much you can do without taking out the ceilings and taking out the drywall to see, but once they started demolishing things, they found a lot more, and that's why we suggest having a big contingency, for the bond vote, because there are always unforeseen.
10%.
Well,
Yeah.
and the elementary school should be clean at the moment,
It
and
should
the
be,
high
yeah.
school was like 50-70% done, but there's still a couple of hot areas
Right,
that they haven't.
and even doing,
The exterior.
yeah,
The exposed parts, but you never know what you run into when you start peeling walls back. And
right.
Ingrid, what were the Claremont numbers again?
We had budgeted $250,000 for hazmat, and Scott Lawson Group did that original kind of survey, and it ended up costing a little over $400,000.
But you did an amazing amount of work in that school, in that building,
Yes, we
for
touched
short
every-
money.
Exactly.
Was that 12 million?
12.5 million total project, yeah.
Amazing amount of work.
We should only have a $150,000 overrun on what your cost estimates are.
Right. All right, the last site, Carpenter site here. So this is a new plan to us, and I guess, I don't know, Mike, if you want to kind of describe it, or?
Well, sure. This is the Carpenter view this is Route 152 here. You're looking at it. The old greenhouses used to be back here. They're still shown on this drawing. Help me with the name of the gentleman who came in. Gove,
Oh.
Jim Gove?
Gove.
Yes.
Jim Gove.
Jim Gove.
Came in, and that, again, that was a very informative meeting. He came in on his own and really helped us out to get an understanding of the wetlands. And the wetlands are marked. Jim's outfit, I think, marked them way back when. There is a time limit on how long those last, and have to remark them, but that's getting down into the weeds, I think, a little bit.
5 years, I
Should be at
believe.
least 5 years.
5 years. yeah.
Wetland area over here, the short of it is it's recommended you don't touch that. It's a high-value wetland. I've walked it myself. It's wet. It's not this area, which isn't, as wet. So at the end of the day, you probably want to leave that area alone from development. There's another wetland area over here. This one's a little under 1.5 acres, this area over here, that could be developed. The DOE regulations have a definition of buildable land, which doesn't include wetlands and slopes and ledge and all that stuff. So this wouldn't count as buildable land, and I get to a point in just a second, as I saw as I was reviewing these DOE regs. You can build on that. You have to pay a certain amount into with the wetland fund, and the purpose of that is so the state can use that money to go preserve other wetlands in some other area of the state. Ballpark, Jim told us it would be about $175,000 per acre. There's a quarter acre exemption for this, and if I did the math, I think it was roughly around, according to his estimate, around $200,000 if we wanted to use this, develop it for whatever purpose, whether it be parking, fields, building, whatever. So that's important to know. But the total buildable area without that is listed here. Again, this is on the website. It's 8.348 acres. And if you're looking at the DOE regs, it's 321.03. They address the minimum lot sizes for high schools, junior, senior high schools, elementary schools, and for a high school, it's 15 contiguous, end quote, acres, plus 1 acre for every 300 students in your core design, and we're roughly at 600, so add another couple acres there, that's 17 acres. So one thing I think, we ought to get an early answer on, and I think it was good to have Amy here, Clark from the DOE regulations, would this be considered contiguous? I mean, we have essentially the same problem on the existing junior, senior high site, but the ball fields out back are considered part of the site. So in total, it's 26 acres. So
They're either grandfathered or they got some exemption.
so
or
we well
somebody
exceed
looked
the
other way.
standard, but that's a question I think we need to,
It is.
touch base, and you can get waivers. This is just like with the rooms and stuff, you can get waivers. I'd imagine it is contiguous. I mean,
Yeah, across the street.
if you're thinking of Claremont, I mean, basically, you stuck your hand out a window and you're off the school property. You know, so there was no, I mean, I don't, they definitely must have got a waiver.
They did.
Yeah, so it's something, a piece
Well,
of,
you have a private road access to the school ball fields from the high school.
right.
Okay. This is a public road. That, to me, would be the one that either trips the contiguous lever or doesn't trip it, and we should be able to get an answer, maybe one that we can change after we get the first answer, but I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I can reach out in the first instance, Amy, just, because I was reviewing these and that stuck out, so that's all I had on that.
Can I just ask, so do we know what the acreage is of the existing facility? Not including
Not including
ballparks?
the ball fields?
We do.
It's on there.
Was it 12 acres?
And this
or
should be on our
15 acres, the
FAQ
whole
list.
park?
We should start it tonight.
I think it's
I think it was like a
I think it's
Like 15, wasn't it?
15. Everybody thought it was 20 when we bought it. Everybody said it was 20 acres. I always knew it wasn't.
So we're about 60% buildable space? is what
That's
we're
not on
talking
this one.
Yeah.
about. That's what I told you.
We should get that number
Yep.
and have
You
it.
know,
Probably put it
used
in our
to be
program.
that you owned
Yep.
to the middle of the road.
And
12 and a half
these
And
are
if
not
somebody had a
160.
road, they all they had was a right-of-way. It wasn't their road.
30, so this,
The town was 12 and a half.
It's
on each
twice as
side of
big
the
as
road.
that.
I think that they had the easement.
Yeah.
God, this should have.
So this is twice as, to scale?
yes.
Okay,
So this would be
Whatever.
twice as big if it was the same scale.
okay, thank you.
So this parcel, I believe, is bigger than.
I see.
Well, here's just
Oh, yeah, there you
for
go. Yeah.
reference. It just gives you a proportion.
Right.
Right, and the total acreage we
Yeah.
were just talking was about 15 acres, of which a little over half is buildable
Take
without the
my
wetlands.
hand, you have more usable acres on that side.
So we just need a firmer answer to that technical question. It's a non-conforming lot according to the DOE standards, but likely eligible for a waiver.
I mean, it could make the difference between yes or, I mean, if it's not feasible, it's not feasible. So
No.
then that would limit our options considerably right there. So,
Got a
yeah, it's
decision.
important.
I'd find it very hard for them to say
Yeah.
no.
Okay. So a waiver is pretty common.
It is.
And hard to think that it wasn't considered when they bought it, but I'm not taking anything for granted, and I don't know what that answer is.
Let's make the decision process
You know.
better going forward.
It may have been answered already, I don't know.
Some of us asked a lot of those questions.
So those are our kind of reviews of the sites. Now
I
that we
actually have one more question of the Carpenter's property. So there's this little dog leg, if you will.
This one?
Yeah, is that something that's wide enough to have access, to have an access road in there?
Question,
It is.
it's a bizarre contour too, doesn't
Like,
it?
where did that come?
Yeah, I mean, you might want to have, if the new option is over here, you might want to have, parent or bus drop-offs
Right where it chokes down, there's a little wet piece right there.
right here.
Yeah, yeah, there is.
It's a
And these are homes all
They are.
on Main Street.
Small tidal pool.
I was wondering that, that's a, thanks,
No, it's-
Lynn, for bringing that. I was wondering, like,
Little
what,
stream, little
what, is there a standard
intermittent
mark
stream.
width of a road, and then a boundary on either side of it?
Typically, it's 50 feet, but I mean, it depends on,
Yeah, and this is 1 in 60.
use.
So that's, at least
But if
60
you,
right
if
there.
you think of the elementary school current exit, right? I mean,
That was
it's,
going to be the entranceway. If I remember correctly,
mhm.
and you might remember as well, I think that was going to be the parent drop-off, and then the buses were going to exit onto Wadley Falls.
Oh, this way?
If I remember, that's why we ended up buying.
Oh,
that.
this thing.
Yes.
Right.
an easement.
I'll
Through-
submit
Yeah.
that.
No, thank you. So we have easement back there. Something,
Yes.
yes.
Right going up to the
We should
wetlands.
show that. Got that marked, Brad, so we can start showing that on these, right in here.
This is an easement here?
Wetlands that can be bought.
Oh, we should
Yeah.
check it.
We should make sure.
Yeah.
We think it's an
Shouldn't
easement.
just draw it in.
Yeah.
If only we could just draw it all in.
We'll find out. We'll put a big question mark on it.
And are there any stipulations when this land was bought, a lot of times there are deed restrictions, you can only use it for this and that. Were there any regulations? Has anyone read that?
Yep, and if it's not used as a school, or if it's solely used for some other purpose, the town has an option to get
Oh.
back,
Okay.
you know,
Yep.
so.
The town owns, the town lent the school board money to, or gave, I think it wasn't lent, money to buy the property, and as a result, I think it owns 24 to 29% of it, should it not be used for its intended purpose.
Sounds good.
Yep.
All the deals.
Thank you.
So now, rather than review the past options, I think we should take our new information, because these past options, we're taking old information, and I don't think we need to go there. We learned a lot doing that, but I don't want to confuse the issue. So I think our next meeting, we'll take those and start doing some new options.
By the way, on the Copper, there has been a phase 1 and a phase 2 done on that. I think we have that.
Did that show the Walker property adjacent to the Perkins property? As part of that parcel?
Where are you looking at, Mark?
That's the, the Perkins property there, right?
Perkins is,
That's Perkins, the rectangle, right there.
This building. No, that's not, isn't it? Do I have
I was
this?
a little
I
confused
thought
with
that said it.
Yeah, it may be worthwhile. I'm
That's
sure you're
Perkins.
gonna have
This is Perkins.
That's
a-
Perkins
Okay,
have
that's
a
right.
fact sheet per property
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
that
Perkins.
says, here's the acreage, here's the
Exactly.
buildable acreage, here's
Yep.
this, here's
And this
that.
is school-owned?
Table.
SAU-owned Perkins property?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
And
that-
then
So we should
the
call it
Walker
that.
property is gone.
correct.
That's vacant, which I don't know why that shows that footprint there.
This is probably just the wetlands guy, and he didn't have the base plan.
But it's still an accurate part of the carpet.
I don't remember when that was torn down or burned down.
Yeah, about 3-4 years ago.
I don't know when this information was developed on this particular drawing.
Okay, well,
Town
we'll
owns that now, right?
update it.
The Walker property?
I thought we did too.
My copy's too small to read.
That
What's
should
it
be
say in
part of
that
that
block,
Perkins and
in the
Walker.
date
Part of
block?
that.
Yeah, I think the Perkins
yeah.
and Walker property should be part of that now.
January 2015.
2015, okay.
We don't want to, right yet, we can do this.
So it looks like there's a little bit of homework we need to do about,
Yes, easements. and-
Somebody carved out the spaces for the homes and businesses
where's the Walker
on the
property?
side
I
of the road.
just for reference.
Which,
That,
Right here?
yep,
So,
So those two should be green.
yeah, I believe
no,
so.
not the Walker
Oh,
property,
so
right?
not the Walker.
We don't own the Walker property, just
Would
the.
you own this?
I'm not
I
sure.
thought we did.
I thought we do.
I thought we
Is it
did
the
too.
house that's occupied?
No,
No, it's
No.
torn down.
It's gone.
all gone.
Okay.
It's gone. It's been torn down.
Right to
Well,
the
that's
left of the
two-
Perkins.
That should be accurate if it's 2015 or somebody didn't do their homework, if that's part of the property.
But this is only a
Yeah.
wetlands guy, so he wouldn't have done all the surveying, that would be
Right.
civil.
And I might just be off because I know there is a house
Right
pretty
there,
close
yep.
here, yeah,
I
so.
thought Doucette did the survey
Yes,
on the
but
property.
if I can for a moment, the dogleg piece closer to town, that we were talking about for an entrance, was not originally part of that. That was a separate piece. So this plan was made from two separate surveys. And in reviewing the deeds, that property is owned by the school. So when he put this plan together, he put them both in there.
So these are both owned by the town.
School.
I believe.
I believe so.
Well, Doucette should know, right? I mean, they should,
Right, but all he was doing was a wetlands plan
It just isn't green.
okay.
for
but
this.
that would increase the acreage.
Yeah, it would.
Absolutely.
Easy enough to check.
So we had to
That's why we're talking about it now.
Yes.
firm those things up so we don't have a moving target, right?
Yes. All right, last but not least, we have our schedule that we reviewed last time. It is now May.
How did that happen?
So program, we are finishing the ed specs. Existing condition survey, we have completed now. So we're gonna start our options development. We do need to schedule a staff review, I don't know, in the end of May sometime. Do you have any sort of teaching days or early June?
May 13th is our, yeah.
We won't be ready then.
Yeah.
Memorial Day picnic and staff.
There we go. Yeah, maybe, you know, for a half an hour after a school day, you can get everyone together? No?
Contractually, I can't.
Oh, you can't, okay. Well, we'll work on it.
Yeah.
We are going to start to have the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and the structural engineers starting to review, so we can get our arms around those systems. And get our arms around the structural seismic issue. Brad has been good in digging into that code, so we're gonna have some real facts for you, and I've started discussions with Michael Hoffman, your building inspector here in town. And we.
Code enforcement officer. Is that
what it is?
Yeah,
Code
he-
enforcement officer.
way beyond just building permits.
Okay.
He the man.
AKA
He the man.
Energy and all that stuff.
DES.
Public forum, we had moved to sometime in June, so we should start setting up what that date is. For the night is a Saturday. And then that's it for now. So that's our immediate kind of what we need to start working on.
It looks like we're on track, and I'm just, and relatedly, I'm looking for when we might want to have our next meeting as a facility committee. I'm thinking May 17th, 2 weeks from tonight, if that makes sense, because we will have at that point had our meeting on Thursday, and hopefully these ed specs will be pretty well dialed in at that point, you know? And then,
That works.
does that work?
Well, I think, you know, when if we're gonna bring some options to the table on the 17th, they'll be rough, because we'll only be a couple of days past actually having
Yeah.
the existing conditions on the drawing.
Right.
And the program revised. So we'll put some blocks up there to represent volume of spaces, so we can.
Well,
a
if
little
the
bit more
17th
specific.
doesn't, I would rather end up meeting when you guys are comfortable, you have something
Yeah,
useful to
it's-
say than
it's
forcing a meeting.
Somewhat arbitrary, that date, so
If you want to pick the 17th, but give us a notice as soon as you can, that
You
it's
wanna say
better
the
to.
24th? So that's.
How's
How's the
might
20,
be-
is that better for you?
Well, I think we could bring more to the table then.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
consider.
that's fine.
We could even do the 31st, but then,
I'd
Nobody
rather not
want-
wait that long.
okay,
Yeah.
excellent.
5/24?
That keeps us on schedule.
Yeah, Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday.
Let's say 6:30 again, if that
We
works.
used to have these meetings on Wednesdays and they switched to Tuesdays, or am I forgetting?
Well, Tuesdays was bad for Ingrid then.
Right, but now it's not.
Now it's not.
Yeah, CIP CIP
We can
may
do either.
start up again at some point, and they like Tuesdays.
Oh, we
Tuesday
can
the
switch it.
So Tuesday, the 24th of May at 6:30, same place. Next meeting.
All right.
And in terms of scheduling, a public forum, we might think about third or fourth week in June, or, when's the last day of school?
When is graduation? Friday, the what?
10th.
10th,
May 10th, or June 10th?
June 10th.
It is early.
Does it make sense to do it before then? Families scatter, or do families scatter?
You probably have a 2-week window before all the sports camp starts and everything like that, probably end of June.
We start right at the end of June, and
Right.
So I'd say within a week and a half after the 10th, you'll probably still have most of the people around, would be my guess. Chris, would you
So
say
maybe
that
the
would probably be
21st,
true?
22nd,
yeah, I
or
mean,
23rd?
most of the kids go right to work. I don't think they scatter too much.
Meredith, you look like you want to say something.
No,
No.
we were just discussing what the last day of school was. I
Oh,
was trying to
okay.
catch up to that.
Maybe we could,
We're
let this, raise it as an issue, and we'll talk about it on Thursday with the school board as well, as to what makes sense, and Saturday, weekday, we want to get the most
Well,
people.
you also want to get some communication out and talk
Absolutely.
it up and not have it blind.
If you're
Right.
talking weekends, like Saturdays and stuff, you're gonna have graduation parties in those
Yeah,
couple of weeks there.
I'd
True.
stay away from a weekend.
Yeah.
I'd do a weekday, and
Yeah.
you're
An
not gonna
evening?
get anybody on the weekends,
No,
you
not
know,
in
with
the
all
summer.
the sports that go on in this town.
Do an evening.
Softball, baseball,
Right.
weekends or soccer.
Maybe a 6 o'clock or 6:30 on a,
Yep.
Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
And maybe have it over a decent amount of time, so people who can't make it, it's, you know, if we had it from like 6 to 8:30 or whatever.
Yeah, if you
would-
give me enough notice, we can do daycare or
Yeah.
childcare
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
junior, senior high school with some of our student organizations. They do that all the
And
time.
While we're talking about, is there a particular day that's a non-starter, not a Friday night, because people scatter for the weekend, but any other day?
What
that's-
about,
Wednesdays and Thursdays seem to be town council and school board days.
We'll have to look at all of that.
night, 21st of June's a Tuesday. I don't know.
Longest
That
day.
is 8th grade graduation.
That's out.
Maybe the 22nd?
It's the last day of school. I'd do it the week before if you
Yeah.
could.
That week of the 13th,
That's what I would
14th,
shoot for.
15th.
all right? Let's, week of
We
the,
just say June 10th was the last day of school?
For seniors.
Ah, gotcha.
all right, well, let's start with that. We'll talk about it more on Thursday.
June
Wasn't the
14th.
last day of
Are you
school,
talking
the
about
last
the
day of school
14th?
for everybody back in the old days? Or no?
Pencil in.
Were you talking the 14th?
Yeah, maybe.
It
June
seems like it could
14th?
still snow.
That looks good.
What's that?
June 14th to Tuesday?
I won't be.
No? Well, that's a,
Isn't that Flag Day as well, or something?
That's what, no.
It's Flag Day. It is. It is Flag, I got it right here. It is Flag Day.
Useless information for 1,000
so,
hours.
so not the 14th, then, 15th?
It's also my nephew's.
Let's think about it more, because I also want to check if there's a council meeting, because 15th's a Wednesday. We'll figure it out. We got it.
But somebody made a point in passing that I think is worth some amplification, which is whatever date
You
you
know, we
pick.
talk in terms skipped
Sooner
like
we can get the
married
word
45
Absolutely.
years, and they still
48.
feel like the young kid on the block.
Yeah,
you know,
48
some
for us
of the
this year.
Able to be and-
Right.
And feel. Absolutely. That's really part of the process.
And Ingrid, just going back to your, we had,
Is that
we had
true?
talked about doing two, at least, public, three.
Underwear older than my
Okay.
son.
And
One
what,
in September when
I have
everybody's
underwear
back,
older than
and
my
then one in the end of November.
see, I love the idea of bookending it
Yeah.
with end of school, beginning of school, and then as we gear up.
Right.
I think that's great.
Great. I think that's it. Covered a lot of ground tonight. Thank you very much.
Like your sippy cup.
Anybody?
Yeah, I noticed that too.